Hello and welcome and thanks for tuning in. You're watching Gravitas with me, Priyanka Sharma. Here's our short for tonight. Our cover story tonight comes from Pakistan, where the people are fighting for survival. Pakistan, where the statistics now paint quite a grim picture. Pakistan, which has been battered by both terror and natural disaster. Pakistan, which is now relying heavily on international aid to pay its bills. The same Pakistan where the leaders have instead jet-setted to Geneva to be part of some climate conference. All this while Pakistanis are struggling to afford basic necessities. So on the show tonight, we'll bring you the plight of the Pakistani people. Also on the show, 90% of people in one province of China are infected with the Wuhan virus. 90%. This is happening at a time when China is opening up to the world. What are the risks involved? To what lengths will China go to infect the world again? And have you seen what's happening in Brazil? Does it look familiar to you? We saw familiar scenes unfolding in America 2 years ago, and that too around the same time. I'll tell you tonight how the virus of Trumpism is infecting Brazil. The crying prince is back. The prince who cried wolf is whinging yet again. Harry is selling his sob stories to the world. We continue to call his bluff. And have you heard of P-Gate? It's a controversy which has made headlines. A grown man allegedly urinated on a co-passenger in business class. The act has shocked the world, and tonight I'll tell you all about the spoilt children of the Sky High Club. All coming up tonight. When Sri Lanka was in the grip of turmoil, we told you time and again that this was not the worst economic crisis of the region. The perfect storm was hovering over Pakistan. Well, it's now time to tell you, we told you so. Just today, news came that Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif has described the crisis in stark, simple words. Pakistan has no money for imports. Pakistan might face a blackout. It has no money to buy oil. Pakistan's shrinking forex reserves are hovering around $5 billion. So what does Pakistan do when the bottom has fallen out? Its Prime Minister goes out to beg. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is in Switzerland with a demand for $16 billion in the name of flood relief. Guess he will be next where? Not in his palatial residence in Islamabad. On 10th of January, he will be heading to a familiar destination, Abu Dhabi, to beg for foreign aid once again from the UAE. Let me remind you, he has been bailed out repeatedly by the Gulf. But has the Gulf had enough? You see, foreign aid has become the drug in the veins of the Pak economy. It's cannabis, if you will. News reports say that Pakistan now wants to sell 2 power plants to Qatar because it does not have the money to run them. While the government has no money to run the state, the people of Pakistan have no money to buy basic necessities, to buy food because of rampant inflation, food shortages, a political crisis, payment default, riots. Pakistan is in a state of a nervous breakdown. Now let me give you a brief glimpse of that collapse. Let's start with inflation. Prices in Pakistan are rising at the rate of 30%, and the graph will continue to go up. What does that mean? Kitchen supplies, essentials, staples, the prices of rice, pulses, sugar, salt, flour, they're all rising by the week. So who is affected the most? The middle class and, of course, the poor. The fat cats are comfortable because the wealth is in their pocket. They have nothing to worry about. But the others are going hungry. Let's not forget we are talking about a country where at least 34% of the population lives below the poverty line. They earn less than $3.2 a day, which is a little over 700 Pakistani rupees. But in Pakistan today, a 20 kg bag of wheat alone costs 3,000 rupees. Remember, inflation does not punish evenly. The situation in rural areas, particularly in Sindh and Balochistan, is beyond desperate. Balochistan's governor says there is no food. And how can the poor afford their basic food? Moong dal, a staple, costs up to 310 rupees per kg. Potatoes range between 35 and 90 Pakistan rupees per kg. Onions up to 220 Pakistani rupees per kilogram. Chicken is out of their reach, up to 460 rupees a kg. Onion prices have gone up 501% when compared to last year. Chicken, 82.5%, costlier than what it was last year. Salt, 49.5%, tea, 65.41%, wheat flour, 45%. Why am I telling you all of this? Because we're talking about essentials here. Wheat, tea and onions are not a luxury. Rotis and naan are a staple in Pakistan. So what do? You fight for survival, and that's exactly what the people of Pakistan are doing. There are reports of fights breaking out at ration shops. There are reports of stampedes at ration shops and deaths due to stampedes. Tragic videos have surfaced online. In one of them, people can be seen running behind a truck, a food truck. This is the plight of the people of Pakistan. Local reports say that Pakistan is running out of palm oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil. Once again, essential items, they have disappeared from the market. It gets darker. Pakistan's defense minister says that the country may soon run out of electricity. Brace for blackouts is the message coming from the government. Listen in.
ये तो existential threat है इस वक्त. हमारे पास जो है इंपोर्ट करने के लिए पैसे नहीं हैं. अगर ब्लैकआउट हो जाएगा, सारे पाकिस्तान में ब्लैकआउट हो जाएगा, हमें उसकी पॉलिटिकल कॉस्ट भी बेयर करनी पड़ेगी, लेकिन दुकानें भी बंद हो जाएंगी, कारखाने भी बंद हो जाएंगे, मार्केटें भी बंद हो जाएंगी, सब कुछ बंद हो जाएगा.
Scary words. Pakistan has already announced a series of austerity measures. Markets have been told to shut shop by 8:30 p.m. local time. Marriage halls need to wrap up by 10 p.m. But is it enough? The answer is no. There's more misery in store. Prices of flour, sugar are expected to go up even further. Ghee is expected to cost up to 62% more in the coming days. Now, what is the government planning to do about it? The golden elite, along with politicians, are in exotic locations for one reason or another. The political power elite has just gathered in Geneva. What's happening there? A fundraiser for Pakistan. They are calling it the International Conference on Climate Resistance Pakistan. The event is being attended by some Western leaders, and Pakistan plans to raise $8 billion from a skeptical world. Pakistan's army chief, though, is on his job. The army chief, remember, is often considered to be more powerful than the Pakistani Prime Minister. So what is General Syed Asim Munir doing these days in these trying times? Well, he's gone to West Asia on a week-long trip. His first stop is Saudi Arabia, next the United Arab Emirates. What's General Munir doing in these countries? Here's what the Pakistan Army says. The general will be meeting the senior leadership of both brotherly countries to discuss matters of mutual interest, military-to-military cooperation and bilateral relations, focusing on security-related subjects. He met Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman. We do not know if this will translate into what Pakistan really needs, which is money for food and oil. Now take what Pakistan's Finance Minister Ishaq Dar recently said. He hopes that Saudi Arabia will park its deposits in the Pakistan Central Bank to provide some relief to Pakistan. But my question is, will Riyadh do that? Depends on the deal that General Munir manages to strike. He has picked Saudi Arabia as his first official visit after assuming office. He hopes to impress the Saudis, stress on the old ties that the two countries share. He will talk of religion. But the Saudis are not soft. Remember, Saudi Arabia has just announced that it will take 400,000 workers from 6 countries, and Pakistan is not on the list of those 6. Even if Riyadh helps, that will only be a stopgap arrangement and will in no way stop Pakistan's economy from crumbling. Look at the official data coming in from Pakistan. Between April and November last year, Saudi Arabia gave Pakistan $900 million in aid and $500 million for importing oil. And just 2 months later, Islamabad is back with the begging bowl. Remember, addiction will always demand more foreign aid. One can't help but ask, did Pakistan ever have a sound economy in the first place? Is this perfect storm the consequence of policies that were dependent only on external assistance rather than indigenous growth? I say you have your answer tonight. And let's now turn our focus to Pakistan's best friend, China, where the Wuhan virus is spreading like wildfire. At least 90%, I repeat, 90% of people in Henan have been infected. This is where the province is located on the map. It is home to 99.4 million people, and at least 88.5 million of them are currently down with the Wuhan virus. I'm not making up this number. This is according to official figures from the Director of the Health Commission for Central Henan Province. This is a scale that's honestly hard to imagine, 90%. Because unless you're watching us from China, you wouldn't know what it means to have 90% of people around you sick. But what I can tell you tonight is what a sick China means for you and your families. I will begin by reminding you that China has dropped its travel restrictions. As of 8th of January, China has gone back to business as usual. At least as far as international travel is concerned, those coming into China do not need to quarantine anymore, which makes it easier for people living in China to travel outside. And travel is what a lot of the Chinese are planning to do. Look at the long queues outside the immigration office in Beijing. People are all waiting to submit their passport applications for renewal. Many are applying for fresh passports.
Due to the industry that I'm in, there are certain links that need to be made with the outside world, so I'll have to travel out more.
Yes, I have been waiting and waiting because of the pandemic. Now I'm looking forward to traveling and seeing more of Japan.
But is everyone comfortable with the idea of people coming in from China, entering their borders at a time when provinces are falling sick en masse? Some people say they find the idea a little scary.
Japan is still one of the top countries in the world in terms of the number of infected people. So I think it's necessary to some extent to protect not only us, but also overseas customers.
Thailand too is preparing for the influx of Chinese tourists. The country is expecting 7 to 10 million Chinese visitors in the coming months. 7 to 10 million. The first flight with Chinese tourists arrived in Thailand today. How many of them do you think were infected? I ask this solely because of what is happening inside China. Last week on the show, we told you about Shanghai, where 75% of residents are estimated to be infected. We told you that even if we take a conservative estimate, it won't be wrong to say that at least 50% of China is currently infected if the situation in other cities is similar to Shanghai. Turns out the reality is worse. We are talking about 90% of people being infected. So let's go back to our old formula again. Let's once again consider a conservative number. Let's say Henan is an exception and that the situation in all of the other provinces isn't all that bad. And 70% of people are infected, not 90%. That still leaves us with 70% of the entire population infected. 70% of 1.4 billion, 7 in 10 people, 7 in 10 travelers. What does that mean for you? Do the maths. Some 245 flights are going out of China daily. That's less than 10% of the pre-pandemic traffic. But scary enough, if one is to assume that 7 in every 10 passengers in these flights may be infected with the Wuhan virus. Or with new variants that the world does not know much about yet. And remember, China isn't exactly sharing data with the world. Henan's major international airport is located in its capital city, Zhengzhou. And from there, you have flights taking off for Singapore, Sydney, Manila, Seoul. Which means Henan is indirectly connected to all major cities of the world. There are routes which the Wuhan virus can take to travel and reinfect the world. There are flights that it can board. Flights to Singapore, Seoul, Shanghai, Sydney, they're all operational already. But who do you think is traveling in these flights? One would assume the people of this very province, the people of Henan. But some 90% of them are infected with the Wuhan virus. So who is traveling? Let's not forget that China is not doing its bid in screening passengers. Else, the flights that landed in Milan wouldn't have nearly 50% of the passengers test positive. Same with the flights that landed in Taiwan last week. So China is letting infected people travel abroad. And last I checked, there were less than 5 seats left on one of the flights to Sydney departing on the 11th of January. Less than 5 seats. In one of the flights to Seoul, same with Bangkok. You know what this means, right? Let's also talk about the gain drain in China. It's a story about how all the gains that China made are slowly slipping away. Like the economic gains, China's economic rise is a story most CCP members love to tell. How the country lifted people out of poverty, became the world's factory and also the second largest economy. The Wuhan virus has poured cold water over China's gains. Its place in the supply chain has come under scrutiny. China's reliability factor is being questioned too. You have companies moving their factories out of China. And what China desperately needs right now as it opens up is to recover, to put its economy back on track. But the question is, who will lead this recovery?
Remember Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba? He was the poster boy of Chinese capitalism. Jack Ma was a story China loved to tell. Just like the story of the Chinese economy. This story, too, was dreamlike. How an English teacher became China's biggest entrepreneur. Jack Ma was the emblem of the Chinese dream. Today, he is a living example of the great Chinese fall. How the greatest of the great fall in China when they rub the supreme leader the wrong way. Some of you may already know that Jack Ma is all set up to step down from the Ant Group. It is a fintech giant Ma created. The company was all set for a record $37 billion IPO. And then things went south for Jack Ma. In 2020, Jack Ma addressed a summit in Shanghai. The event had some high-profile guests, including top political officials and financial officials. It was there that Jack Ma slammed Chinese regulators. He accused them of stifling innovation. Jack Ma said that Chinese banks have a pawn shop mentality. These remarks did not go down well with Xi Jinping. He decided to punish Jack Ma. How? By breaking up his empire. The Ant Group was counting down to its IPO. It was expected to be the world's biggest ever IPO. Xi Jinping stopped the Ant Group from going public just 48 hours before the IPO. He launched an investigation into the company. The Ant Group was broken up. Its operations split. Xi Jinping also went after Alibaba. The e-commerce company was fined $2.8 billion for allegedly abusing its dominance. The group lost its valuation and Jack Ma his reputation. The poster boy of Chinese capitalism was now being called a villain, an evil capitalist. Last year in July, we told you that the talk in the corridors is that Jack Ma is ceding control of the Ant Group. He's been out of the public eye for 2 years, and he wasn't planning to come back to the company's headquarters. In December, we told you that Jack Ma was reportedly hiding out in Japan. He was on a sort of self-imposed exile. And now there is this news. Jack Ma is giving up controls of the group he has founded. Where does this leave China? With wrong examples, with stories of entrepreneurial falls, and without a poster boy who can front China's recovery.
Let's move on. Supporters of Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro invaded the presidential palace. You've seen this story through the day. They defaced the country's Congress and stormed the Supreme Court. Before I get on with it, just take a look at these visuals. Did they give you a sense of déjà vu? Did they remind you of something that happened 2 years ago in America? Let me explain. What happened on Sunday in Brazil was a stark reminder of the January 6th riot in America, when former US President Donald Trump supporters stormed Capitol Hill. 2 years on, history has been repeated in Brazil. It seems the country has been infected with the virus of Trumpism. Let's see what actually happened. It has just been a week since the inauguration of leftist leader Lula da Silva. Bolsonaro supporters are still in denial. Severe polarization grips the country after far-right former President Bolsonaro lost the election in October. He still claims that Brazil's electronic voting system was prone to fraud. Sounds very familiar. Since then, a violent movement of election deniers had been bubbling up in the country, and the lid finally blew up on Sunday. Dressed in yellow and green of Brazil's flag, thousands of Bolsonaro supporters carried out a riot. They breached all barricades set up by the armed forces. The extremists vandalized political buildings and left behind a trail of destruction. They smashed windows of the presidential palace and flooded parts of Congress with a sprinkler system. And as if that wasn't enough, they ransacked ceremonial rooms in the Supreme Court. Questions are rising. How did the riots even take place? And reports say that the protesters gathered at the army headquarters. Now, these headquarters are 8 kilometers away from Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace. As you can imagine, it is a long march, and experts are now pointing out how security forces did not intervene. Video footage shows that they offered little resistance to protesters. An army bridge is permanently stationed at the presidential palace, but the rioters managed to storm the building and vandalize it. All facts point towards one question. Were officials from the inside involved in the riot? Did they play any part in orchestrating the chaos? Take a look. It took a little over 3 hours to bring the situation under control. The police faced off with the rioters to regain the buildings. Tear gas was fired. Busloads of people were detained by the police at the site. Brazil's Justice Ministry says at least 200 rioters have been arrested, but reports are putting the numbers at 400. Even after being detained, the protesters held their ground.
I'm speaking to the world. This is injustice. There are no criminals here. We were just protesting. We want to save the country.
In the aftermath of the incident, President Lula toured the Supreme Court building to see the damage for himself. He described the events as barbaric. He has ordered the government to take control of the federal district's security and vowed severe punishment for the culprits. Bolsonaro himself had been silent for nearly 6 hours after the rampage. He ultimately took to Twitter to deny all allegations of any involvement. The former president also tried to hurl dirt on Lula. No surprises there. Now, whatever is happening in Brazil isn't a new spectacle. The world looks up to the West in various aspects, and this riot too seems to be inspired from the US. The incident has brought back memories of the Capitol Hill attack, and many political analysts had seen it coming. Far from the capital, Brazilian industries had been facing unrest for months. Highway blockades have disrupted grain shipments and meat-packing operations. Brazil's financial markets have swung sharply in recent weeks due to stretched public finances. All eyes have been on Lula to see how he would reconcile his big spending promises. With questions looming over Lula's leadership, Bolsonaro had also sown doubts about Brazil's electronic voting system. And that too without any evidence, just like Trump, who did not concede after American voters elected Joe Biden. Trump had been Bolsonaro's biggest international ally. We can't forget that. Bolsonaro's tactics had already won him the title of Trump of the Tropics. The situation right in front of your eyes, it's difficult not to draw parallels. Both the leaders are extremists. They are infamous for their fascism. Both have large armies of supporters who are under the spell of their ideologies. Both had faced a defeat they were reluctant to admit, and now both have been at the heart of a barbaric riot, attacks on political buildings, of using their fanatic fans to do their dirty work. How far will these leaders go to gain power, to satisfy their ego and wash off their political defeats? Have you heard of P-Gate? It's a controversy involving an unruly flight passenger, and his crime is exactly what it sounds like. I told you this story on the show last week. Now there's a hashtag to go with it. P-Gate. Let me explain. A man called Shankar Mishra has been accused of urinating on an elderly woman. This was on a flight from New York to New Delhi in November last year. He was allegedly inebriated, and this was in the business class of an Air India flight. Did the words business class shock you, or the fact that a grown man urinated on a co-passenger? Well, all aspects of this story are shocking and disgusting, to say the least. There's more to the story, to P-Gate. This man, the accused, worked for a reputed US-based firm, Wells Fargo, as a vice president of the India chapter. Mishra has now been sacked. The company says it found the allegations deeply disturbing. The company's statement is on your screens now. And the plot thickens. Last we checked, authorities were on the lookout for the accused, and everyone from national media to social media is following the story closely. Why wouldn't they? The situation has escalated. So much so that the Tata Group chairman conceded that Air India's response to the flyer's alleged act should have been much swifter. Remember, the Tata Group owns the carrier. Moreover, the DGCA, the body which regulates civil aviation in India, had said that Air India's conduct in handling the incident had been unprofessional. Some cabin crew members have been derostered, and reports say that the airline is reviewing its policy on in-flight alcohol service. But I ask you tonight, is alcohol to blame? Is the airline to blame? Or is the crew to blame? Remember, this is a grown man we're talking about, who allegedly drank one drink too many and urinated on a co-passenger in business class. This raises a bigger question. It puts into focus the entitled behavior of the spoiled children of the Sky High Club. Those who love to fly business class or first class. Those who think that a first class ticket entitles them not just to exclusivity and luxury, but also to be badly behaved, disrespectful, abusive. The spoiled children of the Sky High Club think that their money gives them access to massive suites, maximum privacy, luxurious showers in the clouds, caviar tasting on a whim, bespoke bedding with the highest thread count. But since when does a Sky High fare give you the right to behave like an ape? This incident is among many. We've been here before, where entitled, inebriated passengers have taken liberties. They have attacked flight crew. Some have been accused of choking them in anger for just doing their job. The case of Shankar Mishra is making headlines because you're all thinking the same thing. How could a man who flies business class, one who worked for such a reputable company, had the best of all worlds, act allegedly like a complete hooligan? But what about the countless others who misbehave with flight crew, with hotel staff, on public transport, simply because they feel they have a right to? As far as punishment goes, Mishra has been sacked, the airline has put out a statement, social media has condemned him, but this doesn't happen all the time. In most cases, these spoiled children of the Sky High Club go unnoticed. Their behavior is brushed off simply because they're able to afford to fly in luxury. At best, they are barred from flying for a certain period of time. There was a time when flying first class or business class was an aspiration. Over the years, as incomes rose, aspirations rose. What was once unattainable now becomes a right. In the last few years, business class seats have become more appealing to everyday travelers. Demand and prices are up. There is a new luxury leisure customer. But when this aspiration becomes entitlement, we need to introspect. When we start using our money as an excuse to disrespect others, we need to introspect. When we start thinking that all rules of civility, humility and respect go out the window when we pay for that reclining seat, we're headed for big trouble as a society. Let's move on. The crying prince has spoken yet again, and he's getting on our nerves. As the release date of Harry's memoir draws close, his remarks are getting increasingly bizarre. They are hitting the headlines every day. Recently, Prince Harry had claimed killing 25 people in Afghanistan. However delusional this may sound, he also claimed that he could communicate with his dead mother, Princess Diana. He has tried to sell his glycerine tears to the whole world through his sob stories, his emotional statements, and as if that wasn't enough, now he has pulled a classic fairy tale move. The boy who cried wolf has turned into Cinderella, it seems. He has blamed his stepmother of ill will. In a recent interview, the Duke of Sussex has described Camilla Parker Bowles as the villain. The villain in his story, mind you. He has accused his stepmother and the Queen Consort of leaking personal information to the British press. Now, we understand the royals have this sense of living in a fairy tale, of playing prince and princess since childhood, and have their butlers and courtiers to clean up their mess after them. But I have to say, Prince Harry is taking it a little too far. He is living in this fantasy world where his stepmother has made deals to sabotage his family and aim for the royal crown, the big prize. In a recent interview referring to Camilla, Prince Harry said, and I'm quoting, She was the villain. She was the third person in their marriage. She needed to rehabilitate her image. He also confirmed that he and his brother, Prince William, begged their father not to marry Camilla. According to him, the marriage wasn't necessary. He believed it would do more harm than good. In his upcoming memoir, Harry has gone so far as to claim that Camilla launched a campaign to marry his father, who is now the king, King Charles III. Prince Harry watched too many rom-coms growing up, it seems. He claims shortly after Camilla started meeting him and Prince William, their private conversations began to appear everywhere in all the papers. Stories that contained pinpoint accurate details, which Harry says surely didn't come from Prince William. He's certain that the details were leaked by Camilla. That's what he alleges. He goes on to allege that Camilla is dangerous. When asked why, he said because of her need to rehabilitate her image. Camilla was the third person in then Prince Charles III and Princess Diana's marriage. They were famously involved in an affair and they tied the knot back in 2005. According to Prince Harry, Camilla compulsively tried to purge herself of being a home wrecker, his words. Now, how does trading information with the press and how has it helped that cause? That is something only Prince Harry seems to know. It's all a big mystery. Now, his claims might have been received a little more seriously if he hadn't built a reputation in recent weeks for seeking attention. First, Prince Harry says he can talk to his dead mother. Then he accuses his stepmother of being a villain. His mommy issues are clearly on display. And the world is finding it hard to take the little prince seriously. Just days ago, he boasted about killing Taliban officials in Afghanistan. Harry served in the British Army for 10 years. But need he be so boastful about the casualties? We've all seen war movies where fighter pilots notch up their kills. Snipers often keep a tally, becoming local heroes that reporters would want to interview and the locals would look up to. But what Harry said triggered outrage from military personnel and British experts. It's not so much his action, but his language. British troops have already been accused of committing war crimes in Afghanistan, and the British prince is telling the world that the Taliban were seen not as humans, but chess pieces. Many believe that what Harry said sounded bloodthirsty and what he said did not fit the British Army's narrative. British soldiers are seen as noble warriors. They are perceived as reluctant to do inhumane things, but still do it for the sake of their country. And Harry seems to have broken an unwritten code. Soldiers mention being part of wars, but they rarely talk about killings, let alone give a count of casualties. And even if they do so, it is a conversation meant for bars, which occurs over a couple of beers with their comrades, not something that is televised all across the world. In a bid to make himself marketable, to be seen as a war hero, Prince Harry may have ignorantly invited security threats. At least that's what the UK experts have said. And when this tactic did not work in his favour, as in failed to fool the viewers, here is the prince trying his hands at different remarks. Hurling accusations at his mother, claiming she launched a campaign to marry in the royal family. Will you buy this one? Or will you wait for another bizarre one to surface? I'm sure it won't take very long. Let's move on now. Imagine this. It's your week off and nobody from work has contacted you. No reminders for approaching deadlines, no queries regarding a project. Not so much as an email to pitch ideas for that big presentation. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? I bet most of you can't relate to this somewhat utopian concept. Weekly offs mean you won't be in office physically. But that never seems to discourage colleagues from contacting you or scheduling a Skype meeting perhaps. After all, you are not being asked to punch in at the office, and if I'm being completely honest, you might be guilty of calling your co-worker on their leave for a quick fixer-upper yourself. Or maybe you're thinking of your annoying manager, the one who can't stop pinging you on weekends or when you're on holiday. That all may change now. An Indian company has taken a bold step. it has introduced a strict policy. It bars employees from contacting their colleagues if they are on leave, and anyone who violates it faces a hefty fine. The company is called Dream 11. It is a fantasy sports platform. Its Dream 11 Unplug policy strives to help its employees catch a break, and people can't help being in awe of it. Sounds like quite a dream, right? It's unlikely your company HR is getting inspired by this, but don't we all wish it would? After all, stressful working hours have become the norm. Burnouts have become a part of the work culture. Call it hustle culture, if you will. One strenuous week blends into the next one. Weekends go by in a blip or a blur. And it rarely goes by without your work WhatsApp groups being spammed or your email account being flooded. Amid this vicious loop, it's a privilege to catch a breather, to unwind, relax, and rejuvenate. Amid all this no-contact policy has worked like a boon for some employees. Anyone who reaches out to another employee during unplugged time has to pay a fine of about $1,200. And when fines are involved, we all know that people tend to take things seriously. The company's co-founders say that it has been a huge success. And why not? Companies often fail to see the importance of breaks. It's a common assumption that a tiny text or a quick phone call won't make much of a difference. But there's more to it than that. You see, it disrupts the employee's work-life balance. It instills a feeling of always being on call, always being available, accessible. The pressure to be accountable to your organization 24/7. And most importantly, it leads to a feeling of obligation. Workers feel compelled to answer work calls. It may be because of guilt, concern for their colleagues, or a fear that they will be seen as ignorant, as shirkers of responsibility. And this cycle of never being off work completely often leads to reduced productivity, to burnouts and slumps. Employers fail to realize the importance of a break, and employees mostly want to get the work done, so they don't mind disturbing their colleagues on their leave, as long as it serves their purpose. It's 2023. Most surveys are telling us that work-life balance will be what makes an employee stick to an organization or head for the exit. While fining employees so heavily might seem a little too much, but it is more like a warning to make staffers realize the importance of a break and remind them of their boundaries. Before I end the show tonight, I want to ask you, who inspires you on social media? I ask this question with no judgment but a bigger purpose. Whom you follow, whom you like, whom you endorse on social media says a lot about you. Because trust me when I say this, people with a huge following on social media are influencing you in ways you don't even know yet. I want to start by focusing on this man. Rather, I want to warn you against him and scores of others who speak like him, think like him. This is Andrew Tate. He's a British-American influencer. How do I describe him? He's a self-proclaimed misogynist. What's that? Someone who hates women, despises them. Why does he feel so strongly about this way about women? We don't know. But he wears this tag proudly. He also called himself a globetrotter, a playboy. He was certainly not shy when he flaunted his wealth without a care in the world. He claimed to be the world's first trillionaire. Thankfully for all of us, he has now been arrested. According to reports, Tate was taken into custody alongside his brother and business partner. This was all part of a probe into human trafficking, organized crime, rape. He was arrested, but not before he had influenced millions. Brainwashed young teenage boys into following his dangerous brand of misogyny. Tate denies all allegations. You see, Andrew Tate had millions of followers on social media. He was earlier banned from Twitter in 2017 at the height of the Harvey Weinstein allegations. He suggested that women should bear the responsibility for being sexually assaulted. I know. It's as reprehensible as it sounds. You may remember him more recently for his spat with climate activist Greta Thunberg, where he flaunted his wealth. He has now been banned from all platforms, but a little too late. His sickening views have been shared, liked, discussed in classrooms, and young boys are speaking in his deplorable language. His brand of toxic masculinity, his bitter, poisonous diatribes about women, they got enough airtime on social media. The former kickboxer influenced millions. He made offensive remarks routinely. But social media gave his toxic views a platform. So much so that some of his videos across social media have been viewed 12.7 billion times. Think of that, 12.7 billion. Let me give you some examples of Tate's influence. Schools in the United Kingdom are very concerned about Tate's rise in notoriety. So much so that he's made it to textbooks. Teachers are concerned. They want to re-educate the millions of impressionable teens who were brainwashed by Tate into promoting ideals of toxic masculinity. They're worried about chatter in high school corridors where Tate's brand, personal brand of outrageous, sexist remarks are being passed around like idle gossip. Tate's viewpoints are being adopted by young teens, teenage boys. You see, Tate marketed himself as hyper-masculine, a self-help guru who was living the trillionaire life. He encouraged his millions of followers to treat women like commodities. He said they belonged in the kitchen, and this is perhaps the most concerning. He advocated controlling women through violence. Are you telling me these are your influencers, your role models? Public figures who endorse toxic, harmful views, flaunt their wealth in your face, and claim to divulge so-called secrets of success in exchange for money. Andrew Tate is perhaps one of countless others, polarizing figures who are amassing wealth, gaining followers, sponsoring hate, promoting violence, glorifying toxic masculinity. In different languages, regions, platforms, they target young men, particularly those who struggle to connect with women. Some are being pulled up for their polarizing, offensive views. Others are thriving, getting sponsorship deals from big brands. Such was Tate's toxic influence that his followers started using the word woman as an insult. Students began to disregard their final exams because they believed they could make money online like Tate, their idol. It's a scary thought. So where do you draw the line? Where does an offensive rhetoric end and violence begin? With social media influence, you can't say for sure. How long will such influencers glorify desire and despair? Recently, a Romanian broadcaster published a transcript of a conversation believed to be between Tate and one of his alleged victims. This is part of the prosecution's case against him. You'll be shocked to read this. Tate has allegedly said to one of the victims, "You have to understand that once you're mine, you'll be mine forever. A woman never leaves her man. I will be the last man in your life." The probe into Andrew Tate is being touted as one which could bring down the king of toxic masculinity. But even if they bring down Andrew Tate, what about the millions who saw him as an idol? What kind of hate and misogyny will they spread? How many students of Tate's misleading, get-rich-quick school of thought are out there? How many are taking forward his legacy of hate? How many are implementing his views in the real world? No investigation has answers to these yet. Time now to take a look at what's happening around the world in Gravitas Global Headlines. Take a look.
The Kremlin says moves by France and other Western countries to supply Ukraine with weapons, including light tanks, is only making life more difficult for Ukrainians. China carries out military drills near Taiwan. Taipei says it's detected over 50 warplanes and 4 naval vessels in the second such exercise this month. Global investment banking major Goldman Sachs to cut over 3,000 jobs across core trading and banking units. The layoffs are said to be part of preparations for a tough economic environment in 2023. Many British members of parliament, including Theresa May and Boris Johnson, earned hundreds of thousands of pounds over and above their salaries, says a Westminster Accounts report. The finding comes amid a cost of living crisis in the country. Meanwhile, there's a glimmer of hope for UK's striking nurses. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hints he may reopen this year's pay deal for nurses when his ministers meet health workers' leaders for talks later today. Zhao Lijian, an outspoken diplomat who exemplified Beijing's wolf warrior turn against the West, will no longer serve as a foreign ministry spokesman, according to a Chinese government website. Uganda says it is expecting to declare an end to an Ebola virus outbreak that emerged late last year and has claimed the lives of at least 56 people. Cities report zero visibility as a thick fog covers parts of North India. Temperatures continue to dip while people brave through the dense conditions. Jon Rahm overturned a 7-shot deficit to win the PGA Tour's Tournament of Champions in Hawaii. The world number 5 ended the tournament 27 under par to beat two-time major winner Colin Morikawa by 2 shots. French Football Federation head Noël Le Graët has been forced to apologize. Following his controversial comments about Zinedine Zidane, Le Graët says his comments about Zidane's interest in the French head coach role were clumsy. Le Graët had earlier said he wouldn't even have taken Zidane's call if he had been in touch.
That's a wrap on Gravitas for today. Thanks for watching with me, Priyanka Sharma. Leaving you as always with Gravitas Images. I'll see you tomorrow.